We've been reporting President Trump announced his administration would impose new sanctions on Iran after Secretary of State Mike Pompeo blamed the country for an attack on oil facilities in Saudi Arabia. The president has received some pushback on his approach so far from people like Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. The Democratic presidential candidate told a crowd in Iowa earlier this week that the U.S. is, quote, one spark away from war with Iran. And Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard joins me now from Capitol Hill. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Elaine.
Congresswoman, you have had some very sharp criticism of President Trump's response so far. What exactly would you do differently than the president?
Well, I want to point, first of all, to what generated this very strong response to me. You know, President Trump put out a tweet a couple of days ago, and I'll just read very briefly what he said. Quote, that we are waiting to hear from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as to who they believe was the cause of this attack and under what terms we would proceed. Now, this is a complete disgrace, especially coming from the President of the United States of America, our Commander-in-Chief, because really what he's doing is putting us, the American people, my brothers and sisters in uniform, our military assets, at the beck and call of Saudi Arabia, as servants of Saudi Arabia, waiting for their command, telling us how we would, quote unquote, proceed. This is an outrageous surrender of our sovereignty and goes against everything that we took an oath to support and defend in our Constitution, to support and protect and serve the American people. Trump has shown once again how he is unfit. He is unfit to serve as our commander-in-chief.
To people who would say, though, this was not a U.S. oil facility, it was a Saudi oil facility, and so it would seem reasonable to some people to wait to see what the Saudis themselves found as a result of the investigation. What would be your response to that?
Yeah, it's one thing to say, hey, look, we'll get information from Saudi Arabia, but that's not all Trump said. In his tweet, again, he says, we will wait to get verification from Saudi Arabia, the kingdom, as to who they believe was the cause of this attack and under what terms we, the United States, would proceed. He is waiting to get that direction from Saudi Arabia, essentially giving up our sovereignty and willing to put my brothers and sisters in uniform on the line to serve Saudi Arabia's interests, not the interests of the United States. For me as president, if I were president and commander-in-chief now, my foremost focus is how can we best strengthen our national security and keep the American people safe? And so what I would do in this situation, first and foremost, to achieve that objective of national security and making sure that Iran is not able to continue to move forward in developing a nuclear weapon. And number two, to prevent an all-out shooting war that would be devastating for us and the world, is to, number one, re-enter that Iran nuclear agreement, prevent Iran from continuing to develop their nuclear weapons program, and number two, remove these crippling economic sanctions so that we can prevent this disastrous war that we are on the precipice of.
Would you meet with Iranian President Rouhani?
I would.
For what purpose?
I think it's an
ultimately?
essential. Yeah, a meeting alone is not enough. We have to have a clear objective for the meeting. And the clear objective for that meeting would be to accomplish exactly what I've just laid out. In the interest of the national security of the American people and our country, meet with the leader of Iran to be able to make sure that both we and Iran gets back into the boundaries of that Iran nuclear agreement, and along with that, take away those crippling economic sanctions that really ultimately are hurting the people of Iran the most.
And so people, just to be clear, so you would ease sanctions in response to this military action taken on the part of Iran?
I would ease sanctions in getting back into the Iran nuclear agreement. You know, these sanctions, they're often put in place to quote unquote punish another country. But really the question we, the American people, need to be asking our leaders is, what are these sanctions actually accomplishing? What is the goal and the objective? And so Trump's announcement today that he's increasing these sanctions, look, we've already seen that hasn't done anything. Nothing's changed. What is he really hoping to accomplish here? We've got to focus on what's best for the American people. And what's best for President Trump to do right now is to realize that his strategy towards Iran has been a complete failure, and it's moving us towards the American people being less safe as Iran goes day by day, being able to continue to move their nuclear weapons program forward, and pushing us closer to the brink of an all-out shooting war with Iran, given this cycle of mutual retaliation that we're seeing continuing.
So under Gabbard administration, then, this military action taken on the part of Iran would result in the easing of sanctions and encouraging Iran to come back to the negotiating table, including a meeting with Iran's president. Is that correct?
I would do what is in the best interest of the United States and the American people. And the current path that we are on, which this president is proposing, of continuing to ratchet up this cycle of mutual retaliation where Iran does this, the United States returns with that, Iran returns with another attack. This is what so quickly spirals out of control and puts us into the position of being in an all-out shooting war with Iran that would be far more costly and devastating to the American people. We'd spend trillions more dollars. We'd see thousands more lives, an unknown number of American troops' lives being sacrificed in this process. What to speak of a refugee crisis in the region? It would be costly for us, the American people, and for the world. So once again, as President Gabbard, as a President and Commander-in-Chief, I would do what's in the best interest of the United States to do all that we can to prevent Iran from continuing to try to get a nuclear weapon and to prevent this kind of all-out disastrous shooting war from happening.
I also want to ask about campaign strategy. You are spending a lot of time focusing on making the next debate. What is your realistic path to the nomination?
I'm actually focusing my time on reaching voters across the country, reaching voters across Iowa. I was just there for the last several days, holding multiple town halls a day and using every platform available to be able to deliver my message about what kind of leadership I would bring to serve them as their President and Commander-in-Chief, and the experience, the unique set of experience and a depth of understanding of these issues of foreign policy that make me best prepared to do that job on day one. That's what I've been doing, and that's what I'll continue to do.
Well, what is the way in which you intend to pick up delegates, though? When we're discussing essentially what this is about, it's about clinching that nomination.
That's
How
right.
does your team intend to pick up those necessary delegates?
By doing exactly what we're doing, meeting with voters one by one, small groups, large groups. They are the ones who will determine who our Democratic nominee will be. They are the ones who have the responsibility of making that decision, and therefore where those delegates will go.
Finally, I want to ask you about an issue brewing in your home state of Hawaii. There has been an ongoing battle, as you know, about building a $1.4 billion telescope on the island's highest peak. As you know as well, this is an area considered sacred by some Native Hawaiians, and therefore they are protesting its construction. Do you think this telescope should be built?
I think we've got to look at the fact that this situation that we're seeing on Mauna Kea in Hawaii is about something that's really much bigger than this one telescope. You mentioned Mauna Kea is a sacred place for both Native Hawaiians and non-Native Hawaiians alike, people who go there and go there to pray. For many people, they consider that as their church. And so when you look at not only the proposed construction of this telescope, but the fact that there have been many telescopes already built on Mauna Kea, and there has been disrespect and desecration of the land there. A number of these telescopes, they're not even being used anymore. They've been decommissioned long ago. And yet there has not been a real directed effort on taking down these telescopes, doing their best to try to restore the land that they were built on. And therefore, what you're seeing by these protectors who are gathered at Mauna Kea is a lack of trust that any of the promises that are being made right now will ever be kept. So in order to answer your question, first, we've got to get to the root cause of the problem here and how Native Hawaiians, cultural practitioners, that broken trust has created the situation we're seeing today.
So you do not support the construction of the telescope, it sounds to me.
I think that you can't even ask that question, you can't even answer that question so long as you're not dealing with the underlying problem.
All right, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Elaine. Great to see you.
Thank you.